Greetings, my few thousand viewers, and however many of you are bots. I read an article in 2016 that said that more than half of all YouTube viewers are actually bots. I don't know how that shakes out for each individual channel, but something to think about the next time you see a big YouTuber and say to yourself, man, there's a lot of people watching this guy. Maybe there are, but half of them aren't real. Anyway, think about that. Today we're going to talk about the progress that I've made in the game. Originally I thought that I was going to have the game menu done. This was in my projected plans that by this month I would just have the whole game menu finished. But I realized that I needed to implement more stuff before that would really happen. The main reason being that although I could have created some placeholders and just moved forward and finished the menu, because I'm working on this whole project solo, there's not really any reason to just not actually do things. So I went back and I added some more characters and some monsters and some stuff like that. But before we get into it, while I was doing the recording the first time for this update, I realized that there was another glitch with the box moving script, and this is funny because I've been going back and forth with this whole box moving thing. I've been pulling my hair out and wondering why it is this is so difficult in Unity. It doesn't make any sense. Seems like moving a box should be one of the most straightforward game mechanics ever. It's in practically everything. And it turns out that there is actually a way to do it. It's so easy. It's like a single line of code. The way that this works is that Unity has a physics engine called Rigid Body, and you're supposed to use it to calculate everything having to do with physics, the way things collide with each other, whether or not things bump off each other, they can push each other. And I have the collision set up correctly, but this means having rigid body properties in every object. And so what I was having trouble with was I would have the character grab a box, and then you'd move the box, and then there were certain situations where if you let go of the box might continue sliding for a frame, and it might bump you. And then if it bumped you, it would cause you to store that physics data in an animation or something. I'm not exactly sure what was causing it to do this, but then the next time you tried to grab a box, it would make you slide, like you'd been hit by the box. And so I couldn't really figure out what was causing this. I still don't really know why the physics engine behaves this way. But while I was doing my recordings for this month's dev blog, I was pushing the block like it worked the way that I wanted it to as far as polling, and I thought, alright, so I've got it fixed, it's good, it's fine. And then I tried pushing it into one of the static NPCs, and the box did this rubbery bounce thing, and I can't conceive of why it would do that, because the physics should see there's an object there and say, well, I can't occupy this space, but yet it decided that it could occupy that space, and then when it realized it couldn't, it just pushed the box. This would cause the box to bump the character, and then the character would store the physics in the animation again, and I just, it was killing me. So then I found out that what happens is you have to use the hinge function in Unity. Unity has this thing that goes with rigid body called hinges, which tells two objects that they're connected. If you don't have physics, you can actually just make one thing a parent of the other, and then when the parent moves, the child will move with it, but you don't want to do that with physics objects because it confuses the physics engine. I wasn't doing that. The box wasn't a parent, it was just being told to move when you dragged it around. It moved with respect to the character. But if you do a hinge, then you don't have to tell the box what it's doing, the box just respects whatever the player character is doing. So now, you grab this box and you're actually hinged to it in a way that the physics engine in Unity will understand, and you push the box around and everything is perfect, there's no more jank, there's no more problems. Knock on wood, cross my fingers, I hope I don't have to come back to this again because it's been really frustrating for such a simple concept. But yeah, that's done, so that's good. The other thing that, like I said, I did is I added 2 new characters to the game because I wanted you to be able to switch between characters within the menu. And so you can do that now. You can go into the menu and you can change characters. You have 2 to choose from. One is Hadley. This is a female character or a female-looking character. They're robots. Do they really have a gender? Philosophy question for you there. Think about it. Exciting discussion. She has this flash ability which blinds enemies, so I added a status ailment in there. It can be applied to either the player character or the monsters. Right now, only this character does it though, so you're only going to see it on monsters. It reduces their evasion and their accuracy, so they're less likely to hit you and you're more likely to hit them. She also has a laser, and this laser is kind of fun because I set it up so that it fires a different color every time you pull the trigger. So it shoots 3 times, you'll be able to upgrade these characters later, you can make her shoot more times, and every time she fires the laser you'll get a different color. This also means that the damage effect on the monster is a different color. I figured the little touches give a little life to the game. And then your second character is Ollie, and Ollie is this old guy with a mustache. He's got a shotgun. He's not very accurate with it, but it does a lot of damage when he does land the hits. And he has this missile attack, which actually can't miss. It just blows up all the enemies on the screen, and it'll do less damage. It's going to be kind of more expensive. Right now, I feel like Ollie is sort of leading over Hadley as far as power goes. I'm not sure if that necessarily needs adjustment. As the game goes on, maybe it'll have it to be Hadley can afford to buy more attacks, so she winds up being better at single target damage, whereas Ollie is clearly better at multi-target damage. But I'll try to keep all the characters sort of balanced off each other. It's difficult to evaluate these things and everything. It'll be more testing before I get it done, and this is just the starting implementation phase anyway. But Ollie is also super well armored. Hadley is supposed to be really evasive. This is another thing where Hadley kind of has this drawback where if she gets hit, she dies really fast, whereas Ollie will just keep on taking him. He'll just stay up for the entire battle. You can hit him with the tank, he'll get back up. So again, the power balance right now, it feels like it leans kind of on Ollie's side based on the playing that I've done. But speaking of the monsters and their power, we've still got the blob in there. That's the starting guy. My thought is that I'm going to introduce different monsters as we go through so that you get familiar with different mechanics of the game. So the first monster is just this blob. He doesn't do anything special. He only has one turn, and he hits you. That's what he does. So you beat up this monster, and so that way you get familiar with the controls. It's pretty straightforward, should be really fast. Then the second thing is this lizard guy, and he takes multiple actions. He's really evasive, and this is supposed to get you adjusted to the idea that if your character has more attacks, you get more chances to hit these lightweight guys. And I'll follow a rule with this. If somebody's really evasive, if a monster is really evasive, it'll have lower health, because evasion is frustrating. I don't want it to be like you miss a lot and then you do little, chip away at a ton of health and continue to miss and miss and miss. That's just unfair and frustrating. So these guys with high evasion will have very little health. You really just have to hit them once and they'll explode. All the monsters explode, everything explodes. This is a thing that I like about the game. And then finally we've got this iBot guy who has a status ailment. And he's also armored, and I'm not entirely sure if I necessarily want to stick to this. I might want to have one more enemy injected here before you run into this guy, because your claw is armor piercing, so I want to establish that you can use this claw on armored enemies. But then it's also introducing the idea of defending to get rid of status ailments, because this is how you're going to get rid of status ailments. Whenever you're inflicted with something, some status ailments go away naturally. The blind status goes away naturally. You can just wait for it to go away, or you can defend and make it go away faster. But this iBot does an attack that lowers your energy more than usual every round. So if you're hit with this thing, the only way to get rid of this effect is to defend. And this is so you learn how to do this. It's asking you to learn two things at once, which I know that a lot of you listening are saying like, yeah, I can do that. Now that it's been explained to me, like directly to me, I totally get that. But when it comes to design, you're supposed to really kind of do, here's the thing, here's your established knowledge, and then here's a little twist, and progress upward one thing at a time. So I might add one more guy to establish the concept of armor and the fact that your claw is armor piercing, but I don't know. My plan is to kind of have 3 sections in the tutorial, and each section, one section is just the blobs, the next section is lizards and blobs, then the third section is these bots. Then you'll do little puzzles and stuff to get around and make the whole thing more gamey and all. You wouldn't just like do random encounters or anything like that. You have to find these guys. Your job is going to be to get rid of them. That's why you have a gun. That's why you were hired, because you have the gun. So yeah, those are all implemented, and then we've got the menu, and the menu is coming along. It still needs sound effects. I need to go back and I need to put in a specific thing to store all the sound effects, so that way the player can adjust the sound effects to their liking. As it is right now, the sound effects are actually coming from a bunch of different sources, so they all have volumes according to the source that they come from, which means that if you wanted to change the volume, you would have to change the volume on every single source that I've used so far, which is kind of a mess. It's not going to work. I got to retool that. But that's going to come up soon over this month. And then aside from that, I also have the Grimwire all set up. So now when you kill a monster, you can go through and you can look at stuff about the monster. It'll tell you funny little facts, or if you haven't killed anything, it's got a funny little blurb. There's also details about the characters written in. I've got little lights going. I'm going to add some more stuff. The menu has actually been a lot of work, more work for me than the battle system, if you can believe it or not. I think it's mostly just because the menu has a lot of moving parts. Every time I go somewhere, there's animated stuff moving around. I have to tell this to go there and instantiate this and do that. So it's a lot also that you can't necessarily see until you run the code. So it's been more time consuming. I suppose a lot of things are, you can't really see the code until you run it, but in this case, it just feels like the menu's been pretty time consuming. I think it's because I've been getting acquainted with some new stuff. Oh, that, and I also added turn boxes into the game so you can see 10 turns in advance what the enemies are going to do or who's coming up next in battle. Some of you guys really strongly recommended that. In fact, that was the single most recommended thing I got from the last video. I've had a couple of other things. I changed the walking so that it's no longer got an acceleration to start up. People said it was like walking on a weird mix between ice and gravel, and that really wasn't what I was going for. Plus, there was no deceleration when you stopped. It was due to the way that I programmed the movement. It was using there's a thing called get axis in the code, where if you hold down the button, you actually don't... you have a value between 0 and 1 when you hold down an axis, and it actually kind of accelerates towards 1. It doesn't just go from 0 to 1. It starts at 0 and then gradually ramps up to 1. So what I was doing is I was just multiplying the axis by your speed, and so as the thing was gradually ramping up to 1, you'd kind of accelerate. And you could say that felt kind of natural, but then I also have it to where the system snaps back from 1 really fast, like practically instantaneously, so there was no deceleration. So it was this weird, like, I'm forcing you to obey some sort of physical law to start with, but then you don't have that physical law when you end. And I decided to just throw out the whole acceleration concept entirely. Now you just go straight to your max speed the moment you hit the button, which I think is more responsive and probably going to be a little bit better. Acceleration is fine, but it makes everything feel really sluggish. I feel like Unity's physics engine, the default settings are all just a little bit, what can I say, floaty feeling. I've seen a couple of games people have made, amateur stuff where they'll try to do a platformer with the default values, and it looks like it just runs like sand. It's not real great. So, going forward, I'll have to really kind of set the values myself and be careful, because Unity's physics engine has some things it wants to do specifically, and I gotta figure out what those limits are, because again, I don't want more situations where I try to grab a box and then it's all wrong because Unity has its own way of handling this stuff. But we'll see, we haven't gotten to that yet. It's not too significant to think about. So yeah, I really appreciate all the feedback that I got on the previous video. That was really helpful. I read all that stuff. I've read every comment that you guys have left and looked into things. I've posted on our Discord a lot. I put stuff on the Patreon. So everywhere I've gotten feedback, I've tried to take it into account, and I'm working on things. If you gave some feedback and it was valid, I won't mind seeing it again. Maybe I forgot about it. There's been a lot to focus on. Maybe I'm in the process of implementing it. There's still stuff to do. The menu is going to have even more moving parts. I kind of want like a flywheel that rotates every time you change a party member or whatever. So there's going to be sound effects and some more stuff that's still coming up. It's all still being kind of worked on. But hopefully my plan is that I should be done with the menu by the end of this month. For real, because now I actually have enough implemented that I can just make it without having to replace placeholders later on. It all works. There's enough iteration that I can see, like, okay, this functions the way that I expect. I'm not entirely sure about the Grimwire. I don't know how many checks you can force a computer to do before it gets slow. Like, in theory, right now what it does is it boots up and then it checks to see what monsters you've killed. And then when you go to the Grimwire, it only spawns the monsters that you killed. And so if there winds up being like 200 monsters in this game, and I don't know that there will be that many because it's a one-man project, but if there were to wind up being so many monsters, I don't know how difficult that is for the computer. It's all just Booleans. It's like true or false. Are you dead? Have you killed this monster? But it's probably not that bad, to be honest. Modern computers are pretty quick as far as I can tell. There's a couple of things that I'm a little worried about with sometimes load times feel a little laggy, and I'm not sure why. I changed the loading situation. Previously, what it was doing was it was just kind of instantaneously loading, and that's supposedly faster than doing an asynchronous load, but now I'm doing an asynchronous load that kicks in while the screen is fading to black. and then it seems like it's still kind of hanging, but it did hang before when I was just using load scene, but that's because it was just loading a scene. So I don't know, I need to look more into how the game actually loads things and figure out how to make that feel a little bit more seamless. I don't want you guys stuck on black screens wondering what the heck I'm doing. I think I can change the amount of data that's being loaded. Like right now, the asynchronous loading function is set to only pull in a certain amount of data to avoid frame stutter, but since I'm using it during a fade to black and you're not supposed to be doing anything at the time, it doesn't actually matter. You can have a little frame stutter, you're not doing anything. It's just fading to black. So I guess it would interrupt the fade, but I don't know, I have to look into it. But yeah, on the bright side, a lot of the stuff that I've implemented so far has proven pretty functional for creating new things. These monsters have been relatively straightforward to implement once I got the art done for them and all the animations and everything. I just have to code, what's your special attack, what do you do? And same for the player characters. They require a lot of animations because all the player characters are animated, so I've had to go in and do everything. But aside from the animations, which are fairly time consuming, aside from the animations, it's been the coding work is pretty straightforward, which means that I probably haven't done the most optimal job, but I've at least done a functional enough job that from here on forward adding more characters is easy enough. And of course I'm only going to add so many characters because each and every character is going to be acquired by doing some sort of side quest, and then if you complete the side quest successfully, or rather a mini game, then you get the character. So I can't do too many guys, get too crazy, because then I'm setting myself up to do, a dozen side quests or a dozen mini games, and I don't know if I'll actually have enough time to get around to that and still release the game within 5 years. So my objective is to get it out there. I don't know. I don't have an objective, but the point is not to take forever. It's gonna get out there. My current goal is to get done with all this stuff, get done with the menu. Then the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna work on the upgrade system, so I know that that's functional, and it won't actually appear coming up. I just want to know that it works. But after I'm done with that, I'll start building the tutorial level, and then when the tutorial level is done, I'll release it as a demo sort of thing. And I'll release the demo to the broad public. It won't be Patreon exclusive, but the other builds will be Patreon exclusive still. The Patreon builds are not going to include bosses, because I don't want to spoil. I also am going to have to be really careful about how much story element I give away. So there'll be some care taken. I don't want to ruin the game for the patrons. You guys are paying and supporting the whole thing, and while I want to show you as much as you can see, I also don't want to have it be like, you're really invested in this and you play everything piecewise, and then when it finally comes out, you've already seen it all. You're paying for it, so I guess maybe that's fine. But if you get fed in small chunks, then it loses effect. So it would be nice to give you a product that feels fresh and exciting, and then is full of new things for you. So there's going to be a bit of a juggling act, but for now, I'll just release what I have done. So yeah, if you're a patron and you want to check out this build, go over to the Patreon. I've got the whole thing posted. I'm just going to do a PC build for now. If you have a Mac and you want a Mac build, let me know. Please object. The only reason I'm doing the PC build is because I can examine the PC build. I have a PC, I can tell whether or not it exported properly. I've had a little bit of a problem where Unity can be somewhat fickle sometimes with certain objects, and so for example, I would create a build and then it would tell me that it just didn't load certain objects, and then I'd do the build again and it would load them properly. So I'm a little concerned that if I do a Mac build, I release it, then you guys will be like, yeah, what gives? There's no menu. And I'll be like, well, I don't know. Unity didn't load the menu for some reason. If I build it again, it'll load the menu. So it's a little weird. I don't know what on the back end causes that, but it is outside of my control, and it's not consistent because doing the same thing twice produces different results. So that's strange, but workable, I suppose. I get some error logs when that comes up, so there's usually some warning. I just hope that there's not a situation where I don't get any kind of log before I see a thing. So yeah, so if you guys see any glitches, if you have comments about anything, whether it's the colors or the music, or if you just hate the concepts or certain things, if you thought some of it's dumb, you can be deconstructive. I can do something with constructive criticism. but it's all valid. I don't really know what to do if you just hate the game, but, feel free to share any opinion you've got on any facet of it. That's the point of these development builds. It's to help suss out bugs, get a feel for what people like, what they don't like, what they'd like to see differently. So I suppose that'll be it. Thanks for tuning in and following this development. I will catch you guys next time.